think what we have to focus on is making sure that everyone who has a legitimate claim for medical negligence is allowed to pursue that for the benefit of all of us.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of the People's Law School. Today's topic is the medical malpractice law in Wisconsin and how, as some would say, it's mispracticed in Wisconsin. Fundamentally, it's a question of fairness. If a doctor commits an act of malpractice and a patient dies, should that patient's family have the right to go to court? Joining us today is Chris Stombaugh, the president of the Wisconsin Association for Justice. And Chris, let's start with the basics.
Hi, Jerry.
48 out of 50 states, this wouldn't even be a question, but it is in Wisconsin. Why?
Well, Wisconsin is unusual in this way in that we are one of only 2 states, because of the way our law is written, that your right to bring a malpractice case depends on the marital status of the person who dies. It's unbelievable. It's a scandal.
And the age.
Yes, and the age.
So if my son goes in for an appendectomy, the doctor commits an act of malpractice and my son dies, and he's 18, I can't do anything from a legal standpoint?
If he is 18 and unmarried, there is no case as a matter of law here in Wisconsin. It's a scandal. We can't allow this to continue and consider ourselves to be civilized.
Put on your lawyer hat. What's the logic in the law? I mean, it had to pass the legislature, a governor had to sign it, it is the law. What's the logic? I guess what I'm really asking is, why are we so different than the other 48 states?
Well, I, for one, don't necessarily believe that this was intentional in terms of how the law was written. I think what has happened, though, is that even after the error has been recognized, because of powerful medical interests in this state, there's no political will to change it, even though it is plainly indefensible under any ground.
For the family, where does fairness come into play? Where does justice come into play?
Well, it's simply this, is that if the same very act happens to your neighbor and their child happens to be married, that person, there's a claim for wrongful death on behalf of that person's spouse and family. In Wisconsin, you know, if you are in the situation you just gave us, no dice. There is just no justice for that family. And you know, we are to have equal justice under the law of this state. In fact, our state constitution says that you can't have a wrong without a remedy in this state. So this is a situation which needs to be addressed by the legislature and the medical society, and people have to agree that this isn't a matter of right versus left in Wisconsin, as we as a polarized state have become. It's now a matter of simply right versus wrong. This can't continue.
Well, hypothetical. My son is crossing the street, car comes along driven by the doctor hits and kills my son.
Yes.
Can the doctor walk away from that?
No. If the doctor is negligent in that respect, the physician will have to meet his full accountability, just like any other person in Wisconsin. I mean, part of the problem that we have overall is that we have basically a position in this state that doctors are special people, different from the rest of us, when they do things. But at least if they're behind the wheel, they're treated like anybody else.
A plumber is held accountable. A home builder is held accountable.
A lawyer
is held accountable.
Yes, absolutely.
But doctors get a mulligan.
Well, I don't have an explanation for it. I think what they're going to do, and how I've generally heard the explanation of this is, well, you know, we need to control medical costs. But under the circumstances, this becomes a public safety issue. Because if there isn't that accountability, and if anybody has followed the writing of several of our leading newspapers and otherwise in this state, the medical regulatory establishment is not doing a very good job policing doctors. We often rank near the bottom in terms of physician discipline in this country, sometimes as low as any of the other states, 50 out of 51 jurisdictions if you include DC. So oftentimes what we have is that the civil justice system is the only way that there's true accountability in the state. And if you're saying from the get-go that these people don't even have a case, then ultimately no one is going to be disciplined, no one is going to know what's happening, and medicine doesn't improve. This is about improving public safety, improving the medical system of this state.
But the doctors are going to say, there's not very many medical malpractice suits because we're good. our environment is attractive to other doctors, so we get better doctors. You would say,
Well, I think what they would also say is that we don't have as much discipline because we're good, but are the doctors in Wisconsin really better than the doctors in Minnesota or in Iowa or in any of the other neighboring states where the discipline rates are much higher? I think that's really, they're being a little bit economical with the truth on that. I think what we have to focus on is making sure that everyone who has a legitimate claim for medical negligence is allowed to pursue that for the benefit of all of us.
what does it do to a family who has lost a child, lost a parent, lost whoever in a situation of malpractice to find out, I'm sorry, there's really nothing you can do?
Well, I mean, it's devastating for those people, obviously, but it's also devastating in all the other ways in which people can't bring malpractice cases in Wisconsin because the law is making it totally impossible to do it economically. So they are in a similar boat to other people who are similarly affected. It's just that on paper, the inability to even, under any circumstances get to court is so jarring to most people. Apparently, unless you're in the legislature, then it's okay sometimes. But we really can't be there as a society and as a state. Wisconsin's better than this. We are far better than this.
But part of the criticism will be directed to trial lawyers.
Sure.
There's an economic factor for you as a business person. You have to front all of the expenses. Is there a middle ground here? Is there an alternative? What does a family really do, Chris?
Well, when you're talking about the economic aspect of it, often the reason why lawyers cannot afford to take these cases is because the caps situation is so bad in Wisconsin that you can't make a reasonable business decision to say, I can't afford to take this case on. Because for a number of reasons, but because in the end, the people can't get fair justice because justice is capped. Okay. So under those circumstances, those cases aren't even brought. So what we need to do is get ourselves back into a situation where there's full justice and full compensation for the total value of the loss, just like any other type of case in Wisconsin. And we don't have a risk of having physicians leave this state for those reasons because we have a patients' compensation fund in the state, which is over $1 billion. And a very small, tiny percentage every year of that is paid out. So under the circumstances, you can't argue any differently than what we're talking about with a straight face.
But money is part of this.
Money talks.
The doctors are showing up with money for politicians. The hospitals are showing up for money with politicians. The insurance companies are showing up with money for politicians. Is it that crass to say money wins in a situation like this?
Well, it is no more crass than when you're looking at our campaign finance structure and what's been taken apart in Wisconsin. We've done articles on it. We don't want to be in a world of Pottersville, out of It's a Wonderful Life, where Mr. Potter gets to decide what the whole town looks like. Ultimately, money talks, but it shouldn't be the only voice that is heard at the ballot box or in the legislature of the state.
You're going to try again this fall. The Wisconsin Association for Justice is going to try to get the law changed. What's going to be different this time than in the past?
Well, what we are doing is making sure that the families are taking the lead on this issue, okay, because it's their loss. Okay, we want to help them understand the process. We want to help give them the legal resources. We want to help them understand what's involved in trying to get laws changed for the better of the people of Wisconsin. So we are happy to assist them. They're taking the lead role on this. We are assisting them, and I hope that other similarly minded, fair organizations will get behind this cause to do the right thing. It's the first step in many steps that need to be taken, but it's, you've got to begin somewhere.
Bottom line, Chris, can the law be changed?
Always, but it takes a will to do it.
Chris Stambaugh, Wisconsin Association for Justice, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for watching us on the People's Law School. We'll see you again soon.